You have a petition that you got from here, you need to bring it back here. So does anybody have any to turn in today?
All right. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay.
I have an announcement.
I just came from Portman's office down at 312 Walnut Street, and what we're trying to do today is get people to go up into his office all day long and talk about how he should not vote for the Senate AHCA. And also at Piatt Park at 5:30, people with pre-existing conditions are supposed to show up with a sign with their pre-existing condition on it. And that's going to be a rally, but if they could have people circulating through Portman's office all day, that'd be wonderful. The other thing is I have petitions for the anti-gerrymandering ballot for all the surrounding counties. If you haven't signed it, let me know.
What time is Piatt Park?
5:30.
Yes, will they let you go up to put this up?
You sign in, take your driver's license, sign in at the security desk. They'll take you up with a guard, 6 people at a time. You fill out a form that'll be scanned telling why you're there and what your concerns are. And then if you're like us, you say, well, we want to have our voices heard too. And then you bend the ear of whatever staffer in the office you can for as long as you want.
The staffers are not too accommodating, in my experience.
Just so that you know, if you're going down to Portman's office, John Kasich has actually stepped up and said that the Senate ACA is bad for Ohio. And he's communicated that to Portman. So we'll see where it goes on this. Darlene, do you want to say something?
Hi, good to see you all. I'm Darlene Rogers, running for judge. Hey, Janet, hey, everybody. It's so terrific that you guys are meeting, and Liz and all of you working so hard to have this every single week is terrific. I'm running for judge in District 4, and odd year elections, municipal judges run in districts, so it's just the southeast portion of Hamilton County. It's a challenging county, but we have a real shot. We did well last year and only lost by 3% of the vote, so we're right back at it this year. And hopefully we'll get some progressive blue judges on the municipal bench this year. So appreciate your vote. Good seeing you.
Tonight, from 6 to 9 at the UC College Conservatory of Music is going to be a Sam DeVos rally. So tonight is also the FC Cincinnati Chicago Fire soccer game starting at 7:30. So the possibilities of having a good crowd for the Sam DeVos rally, 6 to 9 at the UC College Conservatory of Music, and gathering people in that are going to the soccer game is a good idea too. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows, I have been going to these rallies, I've been going to the prayer vigils. What you are hearing in the news is not true. They keep talking about violence. They keep talking about violence is going to erupt. These have been the most peaceful demonstrations I've ever seen. Mrs. DeVos would not have any part of it. His daughters would not have any part of the violence. So anything you're hearing on the news, it is not true. Typical yellow journalism.
Yesterday morning, the first person I contacted was I assume a Fox watcher for sure, but I couldn't believe it. But instead of saying hello, he was telling me about, oh my God, we're going to have this big riot. I mean, in other words, can you imagine the psychology of that? I can't. I just blew my mind. I told him, I don't know where you're getting that information, but it's pretty peaceful downtown. I think it's going backwards to the civil rights thing. I was really I was shocked and amazed that somebody would that's the first thing out of their mouth.
I just wanted to say hi to everybody. You all see me every week because I love the speakers here and I enjoy Chinese food, and hey, I like talking to all of you too. I'm Janet Everhard, Dr. Janet Everhard, running for the 2nd Congressional District. And if you don't know what district you're in, come talk to me. We'll discuss your neighborhood, sometimes your street. That gerrymandering thing makes it very difficult to know oftentimes what district you reside in. Anyway, thank you all for supporting me. And if you're planning on going to an event or a parade or anything, would like to wear a t-shirt, we're going to do a new silk screen soon to get t-shirts. We hand out stickers to kids, anything to get the name recognition. We're 16 months out, and we'd really like everyone to know that Everhard name so that they can put me on the ballot in May and November of next year. Thanks so much.
And it's ever hard to remember.
It's Everhard, absolutely.
Ever ready, yeah. I also wanted to let people know real quickly, I forgot to tell you on the petitions, they don't have to be, you don't have to stop getting signatures yet. So I have extra if you need any, okay? You just have to turn them in over at the headquarters.
I want to thank our speaker because you get all these clowns standing before you have to start. That's it. I love this event. I love this event. I'm speaking only for myself. Yeah. For the Cincinnati Educational Justice Coalition on the 13th at the Fire Museum, we'll have our monthly meeting, second Thursday of every month. And one of our most active members, Susan Stitzlin, has written a book on public education. And we're going to try to organize a way to get the book for half price, and then the next in a month we'll have a cocktail party and a little literary table, and it should be fun. It should be fun. So that's the big news, that we're actually going to have a book discussion, and we'll try to make that maybe a permanent part of the calendar.
You didn't say what time.
Oh, I'm sorry, 6 o'clock
6 o'clock
at the Fire Museum.
at the Fire Museum.
Hi, my name's Monica.
Hey, Monica.
I'm with the Arlene Dems. I also host the evening portion of this. Our next one is June 20th. It's a Thursday evening at Red Rose Pizzeria at 6. July. Thank you so much. In any case, our speaker will be Lynn Punzik, a lawyer on sexual harassment. I hope you can all join us. Also, I also am the distributor for the signs Welcome to Our Neighborhood. If you would like to have one, order it for me. 6 to 8 p.m., July 20th. At the Red Rose Pizzeria, 5915 Hamilton Avenue. Thank you.
Yes.
Just really quickly, because the healthcare thing is coming up. If you are having trouble getting through by phone, try ResistBot. It is, I want to say free, but actually whatever your messaging rate is, text messaging rate, that's the only charge. If you would like to see how to use that, see me after the meeting and I'll get you set up.
Anyone else? Arlene, you're up.
And without any further delay, we have Arlene Golembrewski. Did I say it right? Wow. See, that's South Bend, Indiana. We had to learn how to do all those kinds of things. So I'm just kind of curious about something. How many of you in this audience were in the Peace Corps? Wow. Okay. I thought there would be a whole lot more, because every person that I have met who was in the Peace Corps has been an activist for their whole entire life. And I really salute them because they've made a difference. And Alberta Hemsley, absolutely, she's Peace Corps, and obviously she's flitting here and there and always making a difference. So Arlene is a graduate of that Big M place up there in Michigan. We won't say too much about that here in Ohio. But her background is in science. But her Peace Corps time was spent in Sierra Leone. And after her time there, she realized that she needed to continue with the rest of her life in doing service. So, Arlene, it's all to you.
How many people here have seen anything about Sierra Leone in the past? In recent years, what have you heard about for Sierra Leone? Probably one subject. Poverty and Ebola. And what I want to do today is share with you this beautiful country that I lived in for 2 years, and I returned to, and now started a foundation, and I go back every year for about a month. It's a beautiful country with a rich history, and one that Americans should know about, because we have very close connections that people do not understand. The slave trade going back to the early 1700s was through Sierra Leone. There is an incredible slave fort that I went to in just recent years, and if you look at where Sierra Leone is, it's the westernmost part of West Africa. Where is it a straight shot to? The American colonies. And when they were establishing new plantations in the Carolinas, Georgia, and I'll talk more about rice growing. They wanted people who knew rice growing, had those skills for developing plantations in the new colonies. More recently, and more closely tied right here in this area, the first Methodist missionaries came to the area where I'm involved in 1855 and established missions there and continue to this day doing work. Where were those missionaries trained and ordained and the whole mission organized? Dayton, Ohio. The first doctor at the hospital they started in 1890 was a Victorian woman who I didn't know she was a woman. There were two. And I looked it up and I thought, where could a Victorian woman get her medical training in 1890? The Cincinnati, I won't get the name quite right, Women's College of Medicine, which later merged with the UC Medical School, I think in the 20s. So there's an incredible history and connections that even though it's a very small country, Americans don't know how closely tied our heritage is together. But we don't have time for all of that, and I have to start when I was a Peace Corps. Here I am in 1974, bright, bushy-eyed, visiting one of the villages of one of my students. Had a walk there. It was only accessible by a footpath. This is in 1974. I want you to look at the picture closely. And now, here I am in February of this year, visiting one of the villages that we work with. What do you see that's different? Color picture. I'm older. A lot older.
They're wearing nicer clothes.
Well, they're wearing some more modern clothes. But my answer, and you'll see in the rest of the pictures, very little has changed since I was there in 1974. Why is that? Well, one great reason is they had to endure this 11-year rebel war that took the country to its knees and, just not only demolished the country physically, but all the institutions of the country. Then they're just getting going. It was very difficult to get back on their feet. They get hit with Ebola in 2014. But I went back, I thought it was going to be a one-off trip with a group of Friends of Sierra Leone, former Peace Corps volunteers, and 4 other of my friends that we all were in the same area decided to go together as a small group. And we went ahead and we visited all of our home villages and just had the most incredible time. I had not been there for 37 years. And we managed to make contacts, stayed a couple days in each place. And I got involved first with girls' education. They were starting a new girls' secondary school, and I asked the chief what his priorities are, what does he need help with, and he said, I want to get this girls' school going. So I donated money, and then we stayed in touch. They invited me back. I went back 2 more times that next year, stayed for a month just on my own, living Peace Corps style. So we talk about Peace Corps, and I'm one of the proud 250,000 alumni of the Peace Corps now. And I think President Kennedy's vision in 1960 is still so valid today, where he said, how are you going to create peace around the world in that time of Cold War, which maybe we feel like sometimes we're stepping in that direction again. And he said, I want to take our own average American citizens implant them in local communities with their counterparts as average citizens, they live together. They share their ideas, their values, people see what America is about, and I think that's as valid today as it was in 1960. And I say now, I'm really doing my second Peace Corps assignment, but it's one that I've been able to create myself. So in recent years, you know, in a couple weeks it'll be 6 years that I first went back in July. So I've had time to think about what am I doing, why am I doing this? And I come up with really 3 reasons. One, the need is so great. It is just compelling, and I hope you'll see. The second one is because I can. We'll talk about that. And the third is I have just the most remarkable community partners that I work with, including the Paramount Chief. So when I say I can, I found by going back Peace Corps style, and again, living in the community, just seeking to understand what are they doing, what are their needs, what's going on, that they had all kinds of ideas. And the whole Peace Corps thing is you're there to help enable and empower the community to do what they need to do, what they want to do. And I found I was able to do that, and there were very straightforward and simple things, thanks to the people I work with. Very pragmatic. We could get started right away for very limited funding and make a difference. So, I've been talking about the people I work with. Here's the Paramount Chief, Charles Cocker. And this man and I were teachers together in 1974. He comes from one of the longest ruling families in the country. They go back to 1667. Has a remarkable family history, and he has had a remarkable career. I had not seen him, had not heard anything about what he was doing. I knew he became Paramount Chief, and he has had the most incredible career. He became Paramount Chief at an early age, 35, with his father's untimely demise. He had already been active in government roles. When I knew him, he had graduated from Forbay College, which back then was called the Athens of Africa, one of the best universities in Africa. But what I remember about him was how smart he was and what natural leader he was. And now I've got to see what he did with his career. Senior government positions, the second longest serving Paramount Chief. During the war, he ended up basically organizing guerrilla warfare with his own people to fight the rebels that were moving through the area and on their way to Freetown. He was active in Parliament after that, helping establish democratic institutions again. For that, he got one of the highest medals in the country, like their equivalent of the Medal of Freedom. Organized the National Council of all Paramount Chiefs, 149, of which he has been the chair. The man is a leader, but I also found he's a good administrator. He needed a partner to work with, because you'll see his chiefdom is not only in one of the poorest countries in the world, it's one of the poorest areas in one of the poorest countries. But there was another person who inspired me to do what I've been doing, and it's the woman here, Rosalind Kembe. When I arrived there in 2011, she had recently come to start this new all-girls high school. And she was born and raised in the chiefdom, had been away and became a senior teacher in the capital. The chief asked her to come back and start the school. I met her, and within 20 minutes I said, I want to work with this woman. Clear vision, very practical, a person who gets things done. And she has, just this year, after getting the school well launched, they've had some of the best results in their district of 40 high schools. She's moved over to become the first full-time managing director for the partner organization that Chief started. So that's the background. Here's Rosalind when I met her in 2011. And so if you could call Paramount Chief Cocker the father of the chiefdom, I call Rosalind the mother of the chiefdom. She is there for child welfare, for education. Every child in the chiefdom is her child. So after a couple visits, we're all sitting together and we identified things we wanted to do together. And we said, okay, let's formalize this. And I went home and started my organization, became a 501c3, and they started theirs and registered with the Sierra Leone government. And we have been working like this ever since. So the two areas we focus on, it's all about how to get this chiefdom more self-reliant and lifting themselves out of poverty. And we're focusing on education, and we're focusing on economic empowerment, and it's through agriculture, because this is a subsistence agriculture area. So here's the kind of villages that we work with. There are 208 villages in this chiefdom of 40,000, and they're like this. So these are the places that are relatively inaccessible. The government doesn't go there. The bigger NGOs don't go there. It's little communities sprinkled all over, so it's difficult for the bigger organizations to deal with. But these are the people who have been left out and left behind, but now we're working on how we can establish both basis for education and then for income producing programs, especially cash crops, where people can grow things themselves. So we're raising fruit trees and helping farmers grow peanuts. So you can't do this work over here, and you can't do it as an American. You have to work as partners. And what we do is we are not the primary partner. So a lot of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, they want to come in, they figured out their program, how they're going to save the world, and they're bestowing it on the local community. And we're coming from the opposite direction, and we're saying, what are the needs that you identify? They're not ours. How can we help you? This is the name of their organization. They call themselves the the Center for Community Empowerment and Transformation.
Is their native language English? I mean, our language?
Yeah, the language of government and business and education is English, but people speak Creole broadly. It's kind of like a Caribbean patois, but it's their own language. It has its own grammar and whatever. The other thing is we work with local authorities. So when you want to get something done in these rural areas, you work through the chiefs. This is the oldest institution in the country. It predates the colonial times. And the federal government, there's only one national level government in the country, and they are entrenched in the capital, Freetown, on the westernmost end of the country. They have no presence in these communities. There's no police, there's no nothing. So things get done through the paramount chief. He or she, there are she's, have a cascading system of chiefs going down to the village level. When they agree to do something, it goes. So this is Chief Lupe Bendu, who is a woman chief in one of the villages where we have helped them to plant an orchard. So she leads her own people on doing the work. Paramount is actually a name that the British gave the chiefs in the 1800s when they started colonizing. They would have just been called kings in their own language. And the British wanted to be sure that they were not confused with the British monarchy, and so they came up with the name and they called them paramount chiefs, so the highest chief. Yeah, we stress sustainability in what we do. We are at the grassroots level, the grassiest grassroots level. So I mentioned we're growing fruit trees and helping people start orchards. Here's an example of what Chiefs calls available technology. This is a tree nursery. So what is it made out of? It's a basic simple pergola of bamboo. They go off to the side, cut it, lash it together, put palm fronds on top for the hot tropical sun, take it off in the rainy season. It's located next to a swamp where there's silty soil, available water. We use money for a few tools, the growing bags, and to buy local fruit that people eat, and they save the seeds, and they plant them. So they have grown 50,000 trees in recent years for a pittance this way. And I know how it works because when I'm there and I'm eating an orange, I have to spit out every seed and make sure I turn them in. Yeah, and we say we leverage money, and I hope you'll see that as we go further. That Sherbrooke Foundation has put in, we're a small organization, real small, and we just work by individual donations. We put some basic seed money in, and then with what they show they can do with it and the results, they've been able to attract, again, some other modest funding. So here's one example. We'll talk more about this. We found the funding and contributed on buying them some printers. So you see Suleiman, the guy standing there with Mrs. Kimbe, he's got his hand on a laser jet we got a couple years ago, and now there's that white printer. It's actually a Rezo duplicator. And so they started a printing business which will generate income to fund their education programs. Right now, until now, you had to drive 3 hours, and you'll see the roads, to the Capitol to print a single piece of paper. For the schools, any exam paper, any report card, church programs, marriage license, any document you want was a 6-hour round trip and usually an overnight. Now they can print it locally and they'll charge less than they do in the Capitol.
I was just wondering where they get their electricity. They have Wi-Fi.
We have no electricity. We're working by borrowing some excess solar power from a group across the street. And we now need to raise funding to get our own solar system. So here's the country. It kind of looks like South Carolina, about the size and shape, 7 million people. And Rotafunk is the headquarters town for this chiefdom, and it then cascades down to the ocean from there. So it's beautiful lowland tropical rainforest. It's gorgeous. It will remind you of the low country in South Carolina. There's wetlands and all these. It's one of the rainiest countries in the world. It all is draining to the ocean. And the area that we work in, as you get close to the coast, it looks like this. I keep tapping this. The Bumpé River bisects Bumpé Chiefdom. And when it starts in Rotafunk, it's like a large stream, a small river. And it goes 30 miles to the ocean. And as you get about 20 miles down, it's the size of the Ohio River. And there's tidal effects. The water is coming in twice a day, every day, and it floods these rice fields. So if you're down in this area, you will have swamp rice and they've been growing on this particular area rice for over 50 years. If you haven't seen rice growing, it is one of the most gorgeous things you've ever seen. This emerald green, it's just beautiful.
I have to tell everybody, the projector is not doing these slides justice. We need to fix the contrast on it, because I can see it on her computer. This is just a little bit.
Yeah. So when I said life hasn't changed in 40 years, in some ways it hasn't changed in 200 years. This is the way people are bringing in the rice harvest. This is just a couple years ago. The fields are dug by hand. The rice is planted by hand. It's harvested with small sickles by hand. It's going to be threshed by hand. The baskets the women are carrying on their head were made by hand. The dugout canoe is made by hand. And this is what subsistence farming and lifestyle is like. So you'll see beautiful small rivers or villages. Some of them use the river as their main transportation. I said it's one of the rainiest countries in the world. When Cincinnati has a heavy rain year, we get 40, 43 inches or so. I'm a gardener, so I pay attention. For the year, 3.5 inches a month. Here, they will get over 40 inches in the month of August. They get 120 to 140 inches, and it all falls in a 4 to 5 month period. It's monsoon climate. It all comes at once. So here's what it does. The roads become unpassable. People get out there and are, trying to throw stuff in the road to make it drivable. Let me talk a bit about, again, the beauty of the country, but now the reality of the country. So only 35% of the people in the country have access to improved drinking water, and by that they mean a well which is dug, concrete lined, and you could treat it with chlorine. Most of these small villages don't even have a well. Improved sanitation with a pit latrine on a concrete slab is even worse. In the dry season, this was either last year or the previous dry season, you're left with these muddy streams, and this is where people are gathering water. 85% of the country is in the dark, even in the capital, Freetown. There's one hydroelectric power plant. It's not very big. They don't have a grid system. And it's not going to go out to all these little villages all over the place. So the one thing that has changed since the old days is they're no longer using kerosene lamps, they're using LED. But it's battery operated, so you're throwing away batteries. We desperately need to get solar in. And on the right, you'll see me working on a computer in my room, and that other thing at the top is a little solar lantern this big. So instead of battery operated, it's got a small solar panel on it. It works great. Life expectancy. In the developed world, it's basically 80 years and up. The world average is about 70. Sierra Leone, it is still 50. Now, these things have improved since I was there 40 years ago. But what's happened is the rest of the world has improved, and it's improved more. So Sierra Leone keeps staying on the bottom. And literacy rate is 35%. Most of these women selling in the market never went to school. Or if they had a couple years, they lost whatever they might have at one time learned. So this is where we started. And we say that education is the foundation for all development. And let me just illustrate by talking about this girl, Zainab, who I first met about 3 years ago, and she's been part of our Girls Scholarship Program, where we pay the school fees. Education is not free for secondary school in Sierra Leone, costs $25 plus a uniform. And when I was introduced to Zainab, I found that she had come from one of the small villages. That's what makes it so hard for children to get secondary school. 60% or more have to leave their small village, go to town that can support a secondary school, and live with someone and board. So her mother was now an older woman, single. She couldn't afford any more to send Zainab to school. She had dropped out, went back 1 year, and her mother said, I just can't handle it. Man came to her mother and said, let me take Zainab to Rodafang. I will get her in school. I'll help her, and then I'll later marry her. So her mother agreed. There are many arranged marriages. Marriage in quotes. So Zainab went. The man had no intention of marrying her. He was already married, although people can have more than one wife. He basically wanted an indentured servant. And that's common for these kids. And she was selling stuff in the market for him. She was going to school, and there was no doubt sex involved. We didn't get into this deeply. So the teacher saw this, and they said, Zainab, you don't have to live like this. They helped her find a friend, a person that she could stay with. The teachers were actually helping themselves with food and giving her some money to live. And the long story short is, after 3 years, when we paid scholarships, here is Zainab as the first graduating class for the girls' school last year, going to the capital to take her the final West African standardized test. So that would be, she's the one in the center with her hand on her hip. And when I asked her before, what do you want to do when you finish school? She says, I want to become a doctor. And I said, why do you want to do that? She says, I want to help people. And this was right when Ebola was starting. So I unfortunately found out that Zainab's scores were not high enough to get accepted even into one of these 2-year colleges. But her life has changed. So people might say, was she a failure? Was this all a failure? No, because this is what happens when you send girls to school. So women will earn 10% more for every year of education they have, including primary school. And you find that the women put 90% of their earnings into their families, which means it's going into the local community. And then importantly, they marry later and they have fewer and healthier children. So here's what this country is up against. Today, getting pregnant and having a baby is one of the riskiest things you can do in Sierra Leone. 1 in 9 women will die during their reproductive lifetime. Infant mortality is equally high. And the US is nothing to brag about. Yeah. And one of the unfortunate things is mortality for children under 5 is also about 1 in 8. And it's for preventable diseases. It's for diarrhea, it's for typhoid, it's for malaria. It may be complicated by the fact that they're weak from malnutrition. So by getting these girls in school and having them get to a stage where they're ready to have children and they can support them, will be getting to the root cause of a lot of these problems. 30% of the children born in the country are to girls 15 to 19, and their bodies are not ready. So we're putting girls through school, and our goal now is to not only get them in school, but to move them into senior high, to keep supporting them and getting them through into senior high. Here's one of the local schools. And they have a Peace Corps volunteer this year. Here's Ethan, and here's the school he's teaching in, Bumpy Academy. And the school only had 3 classrooms, and they wanted to do all 6 grades. They had some makeshift. They were going to a primary school in the afternoons after school let out to teach. Now they've started building, and I'm glad to say when we give scholarships to the school, it's for school operating costs. So they bought some of the zinc that they put on the roof, and year by year, they just keep bit by bit adding to their school. So we have supported 5 schools now, almost 800 scholarships in 4 years, and this year we're committing to 350, we'll hit 1,000. But we don't stop with the children. These adults need education too. And this was very much driven by the local community. When Mrs. Kimbe moved there as the first woman teacher of any experience, the women came to her and they said, we want to learn how to read and write. And when I first arrived, she was doing some classes on a blackboard after school on the front porch of her house. As she expanded her school and added more teachers, they agreed on a voluntary basis to start doing adult literacy. And the people came. Men, some men, largely women, and they call it functional literacy because they're not doing an academic style of schooling. It's what do these people need to be farmers, to be small business people in the market, and to improve their lives. So here's a couple of the classes. The woman on the bottom here, this is her 12th child, 12. And she's in her 40s and she decided, I'm going to learn how to read and write. She's learning her alphabet and she's learning here adding and subtracting. This lesson was how do you carry when you're adding. And the people above are a little bit more advanced and they're learning more advanced skills. So these people are not meant to go to college, although that would be wonderful if they could. But here's examples of where already in just a couple years, these women have moved on to further vocational training. They're learning GED style until they learn enough that they can pass the entrance test for the program they want to go into. So 3 women have become primary school teachers, 3 have gone on to nurses aid training, and Lucy and Fatmata over here are now police women. So one of the earliest programs that Mrs. Kimbe and I decided on 6 years ago was we wanted to introduce computer literacy. And we said we need vocational training that will give people job skills. They probably won't go to college, but we can help them be more employable, even in this remote area. So we had no idea how we were going to do it, but we said this is our goal. And here we are with the first class for high school students in January. I want to show you how we started. Chief gave a building that had been burned out by the rebels during the war, but it had a good concrete slab and some walls left, and it was right just off the main street in the center of town. So during Ebola, he said, we're stuck here, we can't go anywhere, let's get some work done. We put some money into it, and they make their own bricks. He provided the lumber from his farm. They put walls within walls, plastered it over, put metal doors and windows in, and here is the finished building. Here's inside. It really is a huge accomplishment. So here's the adult education classes, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Children are welcome, babies are there, mothers bring their kids, some are playing outside, somehow the smallest ones get taken care of inside, and they're learning. And here's the first high school students. We ended up getting a donation of 50 refurbished computers from a company here in the Cincinnati area. And we had the computers before we had the building, so you know, you go with what you can do. And as I said, the printing service is developing their business, and the income will go to funding these education programs. So everybody who works in these areas knows that education alone is not going to lift people out of poverty. It doesn't do it here either. If there aren't jobs and there isn't some kind of economic empowerment, people just ended up leaving the area, and there isn't enough work in the country anyway. So Chief, being the enlightened leader that he is, he said, we need to develop our own chiefdom, and we are agriculture, and we'll do it here. So the other leg of our program is on these agriculture programs. Here's the women's vegetable growing, where women are growing peanuts. So they get a big bale of peanuts, they get a 100-pound bag of rice to feed their family while they're growing, and we'll look at that. So Chief said his goal is that every child will have access to a secondary school education. And he said we have to do it ourselves. He said we have nothing, but we are rich in land, in water, and in the agriculture skills of our people. So let me talk about one of the women who was in the peanut growing group last year. So I titled this, Breaking the Cycle of Poverty Takes Only Peanuts. So when I met Emma Sassay, she had 8 children, 6 are surviving, and I asked her, how did this program help her? She got the opportunity to grow peanuts last year. And she said, I no longer have to take out loans to send my children to school. So here's how it works for subsistence farming families. You can only grow as much as you can handle manually. It's all manual. So you're not going to grow an area, a whole lot bigger than, the room, this part of the restaurant that we're in, going back a bit. And then when you harvest, most of your crop is going to be saved to feed your family. That's what you eat for the rest of the year. Then you have to save seed, and then you use some of the rice to barter locally for other things that you want. So somebody else is making palm oil, you trade rice for palm oil, and this is the way it works. So if you want to send kids to school, they end up taking out loans, and the loans can have like 50% interest rates and more. The lenders come immediately after the harvest. They want to make sure they get their money. So then the people are selling their rice when the prices are depressed, because everybody is harvesting rice. And they're in this endless cycle of poverty. So what Emma could do is now, get another piece of land. Rice is grown in the rainy season, peanuts in the dry season. They can grow both. We got them started, and after 4 months, they were harvesting peanuts. And with this, the women were earning 2 to 3 times more than what they were earning growing rice, and they can still grow rice. Yeah.
How is the arable land distributed?
Land is not, it's a good question. Land is not owned in Sierra Leone. And it is it's communally owned by the chiefdom and all the people. So land would have been apportioned over the years to families who have the birthrights that live there. And then if the chief, they have more land than they can farm. If I came, because I've asked the chief, I said, I want to grow some fruit trees myself. So if I have a productive use of the land, the chief will look around and he'll find appropriate land and I can use it. It's a very interesting system. So the women now can earn 2 to 3 times their income with peanuts. They can save some money. They can use it for education. It costs $75 per woman. We added a drying tarp because in the very first group we found if they're just drying their peanuts on the ground, they can get moist, they can start getting moldy, and they'll reduce their yield. So for $75, they get a bale of peanuts that costs $30, they get a 100-pound bag of rice, and they get a drying tarp. And the women are so grateful, so enthusiastic, and they work together, they go to each other's fields, and they're working as a team and singing, and for them it's a huge deal. And it costs $75. So Village Orchards is where we're really moving now, and this is Chief's long-term plan. He said, we used to grow many fruit trees here before the war. He said families had fruit throughout the year. A lot of that was lost. Farms were abandoned for years and years, and people had to recover the land from the bush. So he has organized village orchards, where the village has to put up 10 acres of land, have it all cleared and ready, have the labor, and the project is growing trees in those nurseries that you saw, and the village will get 800 to 1,200 fruit trees of different types depending on the location, what is most suited for that area. And in 4 to 5 years, these orchards can nominally be producing $10,000 and $12,000 a year. And they will keep producing. I was eating grapefruits from trees that were 50 years old. So Chief, again, in this communal system and with their whole system of chiefs, he's working with them that this is a community project. Part of the money will be apportioned to education. The rest they can use for community development. So do they want to dig a well? Do they want to build a primary school? Do they want to improve a road? They will have that money and can be using it year after year. And will, then the chief will move into teaching them how to run these things as a small business when it gets going. So here's another picture of the nursery. Here's what an orchard looks like when you start. They are reclaiming wild bush. So men come in with machetes and cut everything down. They plant the trees about 25-foot intervals for their mature height, at size and the canopy, and then they will, tend these trees as they continue to grow. So I asked people in a couple of these villages, why are you doing this, or how is this helping you? And there was one guy in this village who could speak a little bit of English. He was speaking for them, and he just immediately said, since we are here, we never see this kind of thing happen to us. We volunteer because we need this to happen in our village. I said, what are you going to do with the money? He said, our primary school fell apart. When you make mud bricks in that torrential rain, after a few years, it falls apart. He said, we need a new school. Here's again Chief Lupe Bendu, and I said, how is this project helping you? Her village, Nyandahun, has an orchard. They started a year and a half ago, and she said, we can send our children to school. You see the theme here with school and education. And just the local farmers who are involved in various projects, they're learning to grow fruit trees themselves. So Momadou started growing 20 guava. Guava is like a big bush, and in 18 months it'll be producing fruit. So in 2 years he now has 22 guava bushes. He made $120 last year from his guava, and it's selling it locally. If you paid the money to transport it to Freetown to the capital, you would earn a lot more. So Chief's goal is that this will become a fruit growing district. When there's enough fruit around, it could support things like making a juice and pulping and that sort of thing. So last thing, I know we're getting late. You see, I'm excited about what we're doing. newborn education savings. And again, Chief says, we can't keep relying on Sherbrooke Foundation and others to be paying for our kids to go to school. We need to do this ourselves. So he is taking an old tradition and marrying it with the new system of saving in a bank. They now have a very small little nonprofit bank branch in town. So we open newborn education savings account, costs $5, including the registration fee. And they're combining it with the custom of planting trees for babies. So this is a naming ceremony about 7 to 10 days after a baby is born, when it looks like it's going to thrive. They do the naming ceremony. And then in the old days, they planted the umbilical gourd with a tree. And I think that happens around Africa. And it was the baby tree. And it grows together with the child. And Chief talked about his own tree and how he loved it, and his grandparents took him to always water and take care of the tree. And you come to appreciate the land, the environment, and farming, and you learn to grow trees. He said, we have to start this again. So we are combining this so that they register the birth. Chief has to do his own birth registration. Government never gets there. They will give the parents 3 fruit trees. They can grow these trees and sell the fruit, or at least eat it and have it for the welfare of their family and their child. But they can save money out of this, put it in the bank, and by the age of 12, the children will have money for their education. And we're now starting orchards centrally that will be dedicated to only producing money that goes into these children's accounts. So Chief is very forward-looking, and I found, it's something you can just get out there and do it. So thank you. I know we're running a long time, but I'd love to talk about anything questions you have now, or if you would like to talk later.
I don't understand how you communicate with people, the language.
Yeah, I am tone deaf when it comes to language. I am one of those people, is just unfortunately not one of my talents. So I'm with enough English-speaking people that I can speak with them, and I know enough Creole that I understand. So they don't speak English just for me, and many of, when they're talking with local people, they have to speak in Creole. But if they talk and I listen, I can follow the conversation. I have difficulty speaking back. So it's one of my areas that I've not been able to master. Can't do everything, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the United Nations has placed a big emphasis on women's education worldwide.
Right.
Is there any way to tap into that, to get any help at all locally from the United Nations?
I wish. One of the reasons I decided to start my own foundation and become my own 501c3 is because I could not find an umbrella group that would act as quickly as we wanted to for these kind of projects. When you're small, it's nickel and dimes to them. So you really have to find this cascading system of aid organizations. And man, have I learned a lot in the last 6 years about development aid. It's an industry. It's an industry, and now that we're getting a little bigger, and have some results under our belt, now I think we're just at the point we're starting to attract some groups. We just got a Rotary Club grant with 7 contributing Rotary clubs. It was based out of Ann Arbor. But what happens when you're new, I think any of you who have been involved in nonprofit work, when you're just starting and you have nothing to show, nobody helps you. So with success, people will jump on the bandwagon. But now we're at the point where we're looking at grants. We did 2 grants this year, or got 2 grants this year.
Would you tell a little bit more about what kind of solar energy system you need?
Yeah. If you see the usual setup, with solar panels on a roof. And then, you've got an inverter and a bank of storage batteries. So there's one across the street that was put in, actually that was a UN grant that Chief got right after the war. They called it Growth Industries, where they wanted to bring small cottage industries in. Cottage industries there didn't flourish, maybe they weren't selected well, but the solar system is there. So they have about 5,000 watts, and we need at least that much. So I've gotten estimates done. We've already had the building wired. We've already run the cables from this other area. But the problem is we're borrowing. So we're limited in how much we can get. And now in the rainy season, we're limited even more. So the estimate I did in February, it's probably about $28,000 to put together a 5,000 or 6,000 watt system. So if anybody knows about groups that might be, interested in that or have some connection with, again, funding and small-scale solar projects, we really need that help.
I've been living in Guatemala, and a lot of Americans come down and they see the issues of poverty. So many, couldn't even start talking about issues. But then they look around and they say, I know what these people need. And they bring something down, or they get some little factory going or whatever, but they don't ask the people.
Right.
I have two American friends who live down there, they've been very involved. And they have just written a book called Doing Good Says Who. And so I commend you for your probably perhaps learning in the Peace Corps, and then carrying that to developing partnerships there in Sierra Leone.
No, thank you. I learned that the hard way in the Peace Corps because we were bringing in we weren't bringing in, I was part of a British education system. Again, this colonial vestige that the schools were burdened with. And, I'm teaching things that these kids were totally irrelevant to their lives. But we had to finish the curriculum. That's what we were supposed to do. I will credit also P&G. I don't think we commented that I worked 30 years for P&G. And most of my work was in a global area. I managed occupational health and safety. And so we were one of the first groups going into P&G acquisitions and joint ventures around the world. So it was an industrial environment. It was many steps up from this. But you again learn that you can't just shove things on people. And you have to find out what are their local issues, their local motivations, what drives them to want to take on change. There has to be something in it for them. So I will say my P&G work, continued that Peace Corps experience. Xiaoji, this was one of my interns at P&G. I don't even want to count how many years ago.
About 20 years ago. Wow. So good to see you again, Arlene. And like Arlene said, I used to be a P&G intern. We were both in the professional health and safety field. Now we all are in non-for-profit. Of course, I have my for-profit field too, real estate. And I've been involved in several non-for-profit organizations. One organization I think would probably be able to work with you. Have you heard of WWW, Women Walking West?
Women Walking West.
Oh,
Walking West. No,
WWW organization. They actually are empowering and helping the people from poor country to walk west to the west to get education. Right. You're doing more maybe locally, but they're doing more empowering them to come here or any other Western country to to have advanced study and good education. So I would like to introduce you to the board.
I appreciate that.
I think they're located in Warren County, and I think that organization probably would be a good addition to your next stage if you want to empower those women to come to the U.S. or come to go to other Western country. I think that's their mission.
Great. Well, and this was one of the things I put down on the handout that we left at the table on how you can help. Donations are great, but there's many other ways, and one is what Xiaoji is talking about, is do you know other organizations that we might, be able to contact, and they're interested in our mission?
Yeah, I will. Thank you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. I really want to thank everybody for listening and for all the questions, and hopefully you learned something about Sierra Leone and about grassroots development and how does, aid and development work.
Could I ask? Okay, there are 2 handouts on the bar, I believe, and also I have a quick question. What was your biggest culture shock? And I'm wondering more about how they do marriage, how they do family things.
Oh, I'd have to maybe think back to my Peace Corps days, because when you live embedded in these small communities, and you do that at the age of 22, you get a lot of those things, dealt with and cleared out of your head. Well, what was personally hard for me, and sometimes it still is, I tell people I'm a third sex. I'm not a man, but I'm not one of their women. And most of the women are illiterate, and there is no one lower on the totem pole of society than an illiterate village woman. And that's why we're working to empower them, and that's one of the chief's goals too. I call him the feminist paramount chief. He is pushing girls and women all the time. I asked him, why do you do that? He says, one, I have so many daughters. But he's just very clear that they are the bottom of the ladder. So when I go, I'm not like them, but I'm not like the man, and you can't just jump into the man's society. So that's becomes one of my hardest things to deal with.
Okay, thank you.
And there's very few educated women around, so. Yeah.
I remember seeing a painful African movie.
It
is. How bad though? Yeah, it's great. A powerful, painful African movie about a woman who's organizing in her village against sclerodectomy. Is that something that is done there? I mean, it's a huge problem all over, but it obviously is part of the whole process of even beginning to teach people about birth control, about actually something they're not just sort of servants for males.
Yeah, Sierra Leone probably doesn't practice the most severe form of female circumcision, but it is one of the countries where it's probably still among the most prevalent. Now, this might go into Liz's last comment about what do I experience and how do I deal with it. I have come to have a whole total different personal feeling about the whole situation. One, it's part of a tradition that goes back, again, hundreds of years probably, for the women's societies. It's part of the initiation. And I have seen the tremendous amount of good that those women's societies do. So here they get demonized because of, this one part of their process. And now I look on the balance of what do those groups do. So when I talk with Chief and people about that there, well, one, Sierra Leone has a law, I think it was actually enacted several years ago, but it's not well understood, on the Child Welfare Act. And it just says things cannot be done against the child's welfare and without consent until the age of 18. So it doesn't explicitly say there cannot be the traditional initiation in societies, but it is interpreted as not until the age of 18. So that is now just really moving through the community and the culture, and it's slowly changing things. And then the other thing, and Chief's clear about this too, is what's really going to make the lasting change is education. So when girls, are in school and they learn about things, and they learn about their health and their reproduction and things like that, they will have more wherewithal to decide for themselves what do they want to do. And I believe most of them, many of them will choose not to do this. But the women's societies are slowly changing too. And that's difficult when you have women who, you know, when I listen to things here now, I cringe when they refer to it. I do not call it FGM, female genital mutilation. I won't use the word. I refer to it as either initiation, or they'll call it cutting, because women will say, how dare you call me mutilated? This is part of my culture, my society. This is something we have done for years, and now you're coming in as an outsider and you are deciding I'm mutilated? How dare you? So I do not condone it, but I understand.
Aren't there a lot of African women who fight against it? I mean, I remember reading a very poignant story. A woman got to the United States. She was running away from Africa precisely because of this, and
Right.
she was put in prison here because she was an illegal immigrant. But there are lots of women who are fighting against it in Africa.
You know, I'm trying to look at what is an analogy here that I could use to explain to people how do you create cultural change and you can't predict it. So the best example I could come up with is gun violence. So what if, you know, we have many people from other countries invest in the US, big time, right? A lot of foreign investment. What if the Chinese, what if the, you know, from Dubai, whatever, what if they came here and said, we're watching this violence in your country, it's all from guns, and this has got to stop. It's affecting my investment, but more basically, it's a human rights thing, and you have got to stop this, and I am hereby, you know, however they would order them to get rid of guns. How would that go down in this country? I know, many people would say good, but you know how it would work.
Well, I would say, yeah, that to follow the analogy, there are lots of people in this country who are trying to get rid of guns.
And there are some women in Sierra Leone and throughout Africa who would like to, you know, get rid of this procedure also. So it's a really, you know, culture, you don't understand the word culture until you go live in another culture, right? It's abstract. When you go live in another culture, or you know, who was that, what, was a Supreme Court justice or something, who was talking about pornography, and he says, I can't tell you exactly how to define it, but I know it when I see it.
Right.
And culture is one of those gut and emotional things. It's a set of beliefs and values of people. And how you go about changing that is a delicate issue, and it has to come from within. And to just give people legalese and medical facts and saying, I've decided that's wrong, you're bad, stop it, is not going to stop it. If anything, it entrenches. But it is slowly changing. And one thing, two things that are helping is this age of consent at 18, and then more education.
I'd like to thank Arlene for being with us today. It's just been wonderful. You've opened my eyes tremendously. I'd like to remind you that the food has been served, and it will be thrown away if we do not pack it up in take-home containers, so feel free to take it with you. And remember, we are not meeting next week. Happy 4th of July. But our next meeting on July 11th will be with Larry Oberdeen, who's from the Building and Trades Unions, and he will be talking about prevailing wage and right to work, or I always call it right to work for less. So have a good 4th. Take care of yourself. Be safe.